Greetings, everyone! Welcome to the Dracovin Empire. Are you ready to dive through the mists once more and head to the Demiplanes of Dread? To Ravenloft? I hope you are. Your host and guide here, Dracovin, has opened special gates that allow us to travel to and from the mists. Please do. Give some tips for my great amount of magic I had to enact for this with liking, subscribing, and ringing the bell over on the YouTube side of things. But now, take my hand. The mists call. And the ritual I use won't last forever. I'm going to get caught. We've arrived. This is an interesting nation. Falkovnia. Well, two nations? One. They're very similar to each other, but there is some storylines behind why Falkovnia needed to change between second nation and fifth nation, and we will discuss them. But perhaps we should discuss the two Darklords, Vlad, and of course, Vladeska, the two Drakovs, who are both similar in many ways, but face different problems in the end. I think that's a very interesting position for them, those two. Very similar to each other, but different. I will talk about the differences between Falkovnia today, and my opinions on why they needed change, because there was a need for a change and update in this case. But also, honestly, there are some things about this that I'm like, they didn't either take things too far or not far enough. Shall we start with good old books, sources? For Vlad and Falkovnia, the older versions, Demiplanes of Dread, I can recommend that one. And for the newer stuff, Favorite King's Guide for Great. These are the two books I recommend. I'm sure there are other books out there that do include information, but these are the two main ones I used as sources for my research for these videos. And I would recommend them for some additional details, especially for simple things like running the ones in 5th edition and stats for your enemy, Vlad. Vlad, our good man. A large, dark man of 85 years old, but appears more like 50. 6'3", wide, heavy frame, skin like weather-beaten brown with age and rough living. Features are coarse, brooding blue-gray eyes, hawkish nose, wearing some sort of battle dress, often chainmail, a cape trimmed with white fur. That's Vlad. Now, in the original lore, Vlad, and this is one of those things about the Domains of Dread that I think in 5th edition, they disconnect them from existing planes. He comes from Kryn. He comes from Greyhawk. Because things were still connecting with Greyhawk. And for Kryn, Coral, with the other planets, Greyhawk, Dragonlance, and Forgotten Realms. To disconnect with the Demiplanes of Dread to a good degree means he couldn't have them. But anyway, he comes from the continent of Calidus on Kryn. He had a mercenary band under the Talon Hawk. He was the Hawk, they were the Talons. He was ruthless. Had brutal tactics. Whoever paid him the most money, usually evil fanatics of Hith. So, one evening long ago, his troop was leaving the conquered lands after a session of looting and pillaging. Fog swelled, mist carried him and his men to Ravenloft. Pretty simple there. Not really much of his story, though. To the edge of Darkon, where Aslan the Lich was. He tried to conquer Darkon, go after Aslan. Turns to be a terrible idea. You know, he underestimated Lich Lord. He had a campaign of terror, sacking villages, mass executing those. He liked to impale people on spikes, plant them into the ground, and eat while they die. You know, he's very Vlad Tepes in that way, at least according to legends. Interestingly enough, even though he's not a vampire. Just the weird things of 2nd edition. So, anyway, that spectacle changed. He did that very often. But the bodies turned into zombies, pulling themselves from the pikes, attacked his men. The dead began to swim. They fled to the mists and found themselves in a new realm that he conquered called Falkovnia. He was a refuge from other territories across a border, and others came there hoping for a better existence. This is when realms were connected, and he was in the core. His men enslaved some, allowed others to settle, depending on the situation and what they needed. And yes, Before he came to Ravenloft, he was just a henchman, a hired goon, worked for higher powers, but he wanted to conquer. And so he kept trying to attack Aslan and Darkon. Failed every time. He went after nearby rulers, tried to invade everybody else. Failed every time. At least 5 times in Darkon. Failure every time. So, yeah. And every one of his talons that perished came back as a powerful soldier that fought against him. All his forces that perished came back against him. And he can't close his borders. He doesn't have any of that kind of power. He is a Dark Lord in name and position, but just doesn't have the same power. He's just a guy. He's just a guy. 15th level human fighter. So I'm going to talk about him for a second here. You can see his story is incredibly simple and kind of bland. He's a conqueror, a would-be, a lesser man who wanted to be greater. A mercenary lord who worked for the highest money, did a lot of horrible things, was always under someone, tried to conquer a land as soon as he arrived in one, went badly, got his own land, and just kept trying to conquer his neighbors. That's it. Not much else. Let's talk Vladeska. Vladeska. Now, here's an interesting thing. We don't talk about the world of her birth at this point. And I think that's both good and bad a lot of times, that it disconnects some of the multiverse of worlds that D&D has when it comes to Ravenloft. But nonetheless, Vladeska was in charge of a group known as the Crimson Falcons, a mercenary group known as the Crimson Falcon, and how the Falcon's talents. Hey, similar name. Her troops executed thousands of ancient grudges, petty atrocities in her land for royal families. She amassed a fortune, she wanted to get a title and a realm, but things changed. During City's raising, her people went too far. There was someone that shouldn't have been killed, and they killed her. It's unsure if it's a prince, a saint, a witch, an angel, whatever it was. This is a person that wasn't supposed to die, and it turned the world against them. Those in rule wanted to hunt down the talents, but her tactical genius allowed them to repel them over and over again. Attack her former benefactors, burn their village, passing their citizens in serfs, impaling anyone at the drop of blood, with a drop of noble blood. For years and years she forged a bloody empire on those that turned against her. And while the last burning city of the last remaining foe, her troops and her were engulfed in the smoke, and was in a new world. Their version of, you guessed it, Drakovin. Ravenloft. They subjugated it, took over the capital city of Lakar, named it Falkovnia. Then comes the problem in this version of Falkovnia. Under a moonless sky, the dead rose against the land's invaders. Surrounding villages fell as the zombies, with hardly a sound, and undead claws scraped against the walls before the first alarms were sounded. This first siege lasted for 4 days, and Drakov's strategies were brilliant and desperate, and turned the hordes back. But it cost a lot of her veteran troops. And since then, she's nearly lost her entire nation. Every month, a new desperate battle unfolds. She prepares for each, certain for plans, an ultimate victory, but doubting the mettle of her troops. When threats and with threats and public impalings, she tries to keep the people more terrified of her than the undead. But every new moon, there's a new army showing up, attacking the wall. So, she, just like Vlad, is just a person. I'd say just a dude, but she's a dude. Don't mind me and my 90s-ness there for that. 90s are aughts. Again, she is just a person. Similarly speaking, she is a brilliant strategist and military leader. That's their advantage that both of them have. And her ability to lead her troops is a very powerful thing. That's what makes her strong. She does have the talents, she has martial law, but the truth is, everybody's going to get killed by the dead. So, yeah, it's a matter of time before things are overrun. People are slowly dying away. Things aren't neat. Which goes us to talk about Falkovnia in its two versions, because I think this is interesting. This is a map of Falkovnia from 5th edition. They're very much like that they have one, but this can be useful for talking about Falkovnia in the older editions. I think the thing about Falkovnia and talking about this, which I've kind of mentioned a bit, old Falkovnia is just a territory. It's Lekar still, who was the largest city in that time period, with a number of smaller, sizable towns, and it was just a medieval kingdom of overtaxed, overworked people that are terrorists by soldiers or conscripted. In a northwestern border of the core, south of the Acropolis, east of Demiplanes, there's nothing special about the old. Falkovnia is just there in a lot of places, and I think that's a very interesting thing about it. It's simple, it's there, it's one man with ambition to conquer the nearby lands and create a larger kingdom. There could be stories there, but those stories aren't really Ravenloft. And I think that's the important thing to kind of talk about here with the original one. The stories here really aren't Ravenloft. In a lot of ways. They can be. Only because of what you deal with. Falkovnia in 5th edition is Ravenloft in a lot of ways. But it very much so isn't Falkovnia. It's Falkovnia in name and location and gender swap leader. I mean, I don't mind. Again, this is something that, can be kind of addressed. Getting a lot more diversity in the people that are charged. And I also think Vladeska seems a lot better written character than Vlad. Vlad was very simple. Vlad just did a lot of horrible things and just ended up in Ravenloft because reasons. Vladeska did a lot of horrible things. Did something incredibly horrible. Turned everyone around her against her. Slothed bloody through, slaughtered countless people. And then got solved to Falkovnia. Conquered it, and now the land is calling undead against her. Also, just to note that every one of the zombies that shows up from the mists in these hordes, she recognizes faces, fallen soldiers, defenders of communities she raised, murdered civilians. She recognizes their faces of the people she killed. That's her torment. It is really much cooler. I'm not gonna lie. This is much cooler. The land is besieged by undead, crumbling cities, walls that barely hold. That's Falkovnia. And it's what they're facing. After aftermath attack, they burn their undead, rebuild what they can, prepare for the next fight of the losing people, losing walls, things they're just going to ruin. I think that's where we can kind of get to a conclusion today, and I want to talk about a conclusion. I think I will do another video where I specifically reach this point of, I feel like in a lot of ways, this is very interesting because I really like what they did here in 5th edition when they wrote the new Falkovnia and Vladeska. They are both better land and better characters. The problem is, they're linked to the old stuff. I think naming her Vladeska instead of Vlad makes her feel a lot less unique on her own. Give her a different first name. Give her something that she could have been related to the old Drakov. And with all the shit that happened in the old lore, the old enemies finally slayed Vlad. Or things fell into things. Vlad eventually passed away. He was just a guy. Remember, a lot of crazy shit happened in the 2nd edition time. And then this person that theoretically is related to him, some distant ancestry, cousin, relative, who did stuff similar to him, and maybe named her band after her ancestor. Could have been an eye. If you want to have similar names and similar connections. Came to this land, conquered it, but found hints of her old ancestry, but then was plagued by the dead. The dead of not only herself, but her ancestor and her family line. That it's not only herself, but her entire, legacy in a lot of ways. There could be some cool writing for that. And I think the thing is, that's respecting the old stuff and embracing the new stuff. Or just make it something on its own. This is I will talk about this. This isn't the first time I feel like they've made some Demiplanes of Dread in Baymaker's Guide that are new, that are really cool and interesting. When they write for their own, I think it's better than linking to the past. And I think in this case, it's another one of those ones where it's like, these are two different characters. They're very similar, but they are kind of two different characters. And it's just, I wouldn't say disrespecting the old lore, because the old lore sucks. But don't mention the old lore in a lot of ways, or don't reference it, if you're not going to either respect it, or admit that it sucks. And they're not doing either. They just ignore it and kind of do something based on top of it. I don't know. It's a funny place to be on. I like Vladeska a lot better than I like Vlad. I'm not going to lie. Vlad's very bland. His Falkovnia is very bland. Vladeska's Falkovnia is really much cooler, a lot more epic of a story, a lot more horror-related, and she's a much more interesting character. She's not a rip... She might still be kind of a rip-off Vlad Tepes in ways. She doesn't kill people still. But it's not written into her backstory. And she had ambition. And did a lot more awful things. And did so, and it makes sense a lot more in her story and backstory. Why she's in it. I think I will kind of leave that there. And say, yeah, that's my kind of 2 cents, at least on these two here. I like Vladeska a lot better. This is not the first time I've liked the new character a lot better. But I also then I'm like, why are we linking these things to the old stuff when there are places that I've gotten into speaking about in these domains where they do respect the old stuff? Mention things about the old stuff. The old stuff still kind of happens. Kind of sometimes, but sometimes not. I don't know. D&D and Ravenloft. I'm going to do a separate video about this. I have a rant. We'll talk about it. Anyway, that'll be it for today. I hope you enjoyed this one. They're interesting characters. In exploring the differences between Vlad and Vladeska, it was another shocking one to see like how much Vlad was so there, and Vladeska was like, wow, this is so much better written. So much better written in so many ways, and I'm like, man, what? Why are you linking her to this trash in a lot of ways? I don't know. If you want to check out more of my stuff, I have a schedule that goes up. It goes up on my social medias. That's on Discord, my Blue Sky, my /X, and over on my About page, my community page on my YouTube. That tells you when I'm going to be live over on Twitch. That schedule is a little bit open for scheduling. And over on YouTube, of course, that schedule is a little more exact, except for like video problems. I move things around then. Remember, check out any of my live plays. Remember to do that like and subscribing and the bell. My comment today is, what do you think about these two? Do you think they could have either done a little bit of that, what I said, like writing them kind of connected a little bit to connect up to the old past, or just ignored it, made a new plane, a new person? You don't have to call it Falkovnia. You don't have to have her be a Drakov. Vladeska can still be Vladeska if you want. Give her a new last name. There's so much you could do. Make it something new. It doesn't have to be the old if you're going to completely ignore the old. What do you think about it? What's your thoughts too? And remember, of course, live plays, as I said, TTRPGs, go check those out. Not current ones on the schedule, but I'll let people know when new ones come up. Go check the old ones and discuss them on the sidelines. Alright, everyone, I'm going to get going. Now that we've left the mists, I hope you enjoyed. Leaving Ravenloft, tough, tired. I'm going to go relax with Twitch chat a little bit. Maybe do some other things. Maybe record some more videos. Till the next time. Whether we dive in Ravenloft or some other realm, plane of existence, where I rant about some things about Ravenloft, I bid you all there a deep and wonderful farewell.